Hello.
Hey, what's up, Sam?
It's Sunday, so not a lot.
Yeah, right. I hear that.
You have an article on the boundaries between on modified entities, so like between CRISPR babies and potential synthetic or mechanical intelligence. And you talk about distinctions between the two and how those lines are kind of getting blurred as technology continues to advance at an unprecedented rate. So you say that the boundaries between living entities and non-living entities are important and shouldn't change. And in your conclusion, I was wondering if you could elaborate on why they shouldn't change and why they're important.
Definitely. Some of the authors I found were showing is that how the boundaries were created, for example, corporations, which are non-living beings, how those came about were much different from those that were thought of for living non-human beings, such as animals. For the corporations, one thing that was brought out was, a corporate structure of a company is a person of legal fiction. It has no physical form. It has a controlling mind. The CEO or the board of directors would be the mind. It is an artifact of a particular place and jurisdiction by good nature of its contributors. So that criteria of defining non-living beings, if they should qualify for personhood, is much different than what other researchers have found for animals, such as with animals, they think, as I would think, that we should take into account the moral agency of animals, their physical appearance, their lack of cognitive awareness, and their ability to realistically exercise their rights, not just on paper. Now, there's a blur between them, as you were saying. Think how they came about, like slaves and women's rights. Those things didn't exist until they made the categorical leap, now becoming living beings with rights, just as any other person at the time. Turning to living non-human beings, such as animals, these have just grown over time. It seems through court cases, that's been the greatest area we can see it beginning to change.
Mm.
So it blurs in the court cases as corporations are being granted rights just like animals, but the criterias at which we measure of how to give these rights or how much of rights we give these entities, the way we measure is the distinction that I think is key to bringing into the future, to not blurring the lines anymore, to keeping those lines distinct, not getting into gray areas.
Yeah. So do you think that it's potentially useful to have sort of political rights be separated or bracketed from personhood and then confer those on different entities as they sort of become worthy of those political rights? Because, I mean, obviously, corporation has been granted personhood, but doesn't necessarily have the same political rights. Do you think it would be useful to have sort of a new legal framework to define that, or are we doing okay right now?
No, I think you hit it spot on. I would agree. For the living non-humans, such as animals, even the personhood rights we do grant animals, we don't expect them to go out and perform their political duties or their citizen duties of voting and all these things. We're simply granting them personhood to the extent it would benefit them. And this is from like euthanization or destruction of their habitat. Whereas, like you said, for corporations, having a political personhood, exercising of their rights, goes a lot farther for the people who are the controlling mind or the people behind the corporation. And so I think, like you said, making a distinction and putting levels that one can exercise based on how defined they are for their personhood characteristics, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the place to do that is sort of through evolving court cases or the legislature, or there's a big, complicated question?
Yeah,
So
no
I
worries.
don't expect a end all be all answer. But is do you think it's going to come from the courts, or should the legislatures do something about it? Or
Yeah. It seems like the court cases have done the main job of restricting any legislative abreachments or advancements. It seems like from my research, I found like legislators were trying to impose, these new laws. They wanted to patent the ability to artificially create some of these beings and then have like ownership, control of like what rights they could have access to. And then the court stepped in and said, well, we already have this legal definition and we're going to use this to restrict the legislatives or anybody's advancement in that area. It seems to be slow going for the courts. I don't even know if the courts will be able to catch up in time at properly giving some of these rights to these entities that are now coming into existence, or by the time they do.
Yeah, so that actually that brings me to sort of the next section is so like we've already covered. You've talked about conferring personhood to trees, forests, corporations, and other non-sentient forms of life. But what about the potentiality of really complex like AI or synthesis of human and machine or something like that? Is that line flexible? Where do we draw that line? Do you think that's even something we have to worry about?
Definitely something we have to worry about. Where we draw the line when you're mixing non-living entities, AI, and non-human entities, now them being, I guess, cyborgs.
Hmm.
I think it'd be a good idea to, merge the qualifying criterias and traits that we use already for these non-living and living non-human entities. Again, like the controlling mind, being able to have cognitive awareness and understand one's moral agency, what's their defined jurisdiction. I think, yeah, you got to combine both the qualities and traits that were used for defining a corporation and the same ones that were used for defining an animal that has the ability to exercise its personhood realistically, not just on paper.
Mm. Yeah, okay. And so do you think that humans or humanity have some sort of essential quality that makes them entirely separate from all other forms of life? Or do you think that something could grow to adopt the attributes of a human so much that they're effectively human? And sort of, I guess that the question boils down to like, is there something like a soul or a human essence that makes humanity
Yeah.
distinct? Is that where personhood comes from, if it exists?
Yeah, great question. 2 points on that. You said, do you ever think it could grow to a point where it seems to be indistinguishable? Yes, I would say, because if we're using these criterias that people come up with that have no basis on, like you were saying, a soul or some just deep consciousness within,
Mm.
we're not basing these criterias on that. And so when we're categorizing entities and their ability to meet these criteria, give them personhood, I'm sure we could reach a point where, a soul or a spirit has no bearing on whether one has access to personhood. However, I do believe that humans are intrinsically different than many other beings out there. Maybe not animals, I'm sure they got something, but yeah, soul, a consciousness.
So humanity like kind of has an inherent worth that's sort of indefinable. And even if we have like some sort of, I don't know, like something from Blade Runner, it might not be exactly the same, even though it could replicate human reactions and thought patterns and stuff.
You nailed it. And I don't know how would you go about finding out whether or not that would be the case, but
Do you think
yeah,
it
you
would
nailed it.
be useful to just ban stuff like that outright? Do you think that's even feasible, or would be like a choice of action? Like, is this a train that is too dangerous to go down?
Man, it seems like the train's already left the station. We could attempt banning it, but like the article suggests, and like you already were thinking about doing research on, CRISPR's already here, and the products that result from that are probably going to be maybe not full consciousness of or full spirit or soul of humans, but they'll have some part of that, and that's already brings in those ethical concerns of, should we just call the line?
Yeah.
We're not.
That brings me to I think this was a separate article, but in your article on CRISPR, you conclude by saying that the technology is coming, the scientific advances are coming, and sort of rather than with like AI or whatever, do you think that there is any way we could stop or roll back the clock on CRISPR just because of the danger it poses? Does the government even have the ability to, or two, the justification to, or do we need to really just focus on creating moral and ethical frameworks to deal with it?
I would say yes to both your points. Yes, roll it back. Yes, the government has the ability. And yes, we have the ability to make those frameworks. Just like, at the time when women and slaves were getting their rights, like we had the frameworks. We just I guess we didn't see the light of like, oh, we can actually do this. Or the people who were in power didn't see the light. And I think we have all the necessary tools, the legal arguments, just the script of how we could roll out some form of basic guideline for getting rights before we start, expanding the CRISPR and the percentage of DNA we inject into animal species. And I think, yeah, roll it back. I know the medical advancements, people are demanding it now and here, but for the ethical consideration, we should at least just, it's not passing laws takes time, but
Yeah.
I'm sure this could make some type of platform issue if the right people got behind it and supported it.
Yeah, because I followed some of your sources, and that led me to a couple places that had a bunch of different articles posted. And one of them was talking about just growing essentially giant cadavers and just dumping people into them when they got sick. So as long as you didn't have like a spinal or brain disease, you could just get plugged into a new body. And it's like that presents a lot of ethical questions, like growing consciouslessness human cadavers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that was like, and they're like, yeah, that's coming within your lifetime. And I was like, oh, okay. But on one hand, there's tremendous benefit for that. We would essentially have biological immortality, or at least a couple hundred years tacked on to everybody who could afford it. Is that worth it? Like, is that worth all these problems, or is it too much of a dangerous thing?
Personally, my view on a societal level, I don't think it's worth all the trouble. I feel like humans, we have a lifespan from point A to death. You get to make choices and live out your life, and us finding ways to expand it. Yeah, that's great and all, but at what point is that just degrading your current lifespan? And does that make what you do here in your would have otherwise been your limited lifespan less impactful, less important, less valuable to you or to what other people see? Yeah, I feel like it's just degrading that, taking away from that.
Yeah, so kind of like with all this stuff that alters humanity, kind of makes us less human in a way.
You got it.
And then sort of to wrap up, several times you mentioned historical eugenics and population curation programs, and especially with CRISPR, this is a big deal. Do you think we could be entering into a new age of like scientific or aesthetic eugenics? Because I know that originally when CRISPR came out, it was sort of like you could curate your baby, is what what NPR was saying. You could pick features, aesthetic features for children that you would have, and we're really into the science now, so it's kind of, we could potentially. I don't think we would. I mean, maybe we would, but for me, I don't see a lot of push for any kind of racial eugenics, but there is a push for potentially scientific curation of the population. You see that in Norway, they have tests for people that have Down syndrome, and they effectively have a 0 rate of Down syndrome births because they abort like a 99% rate. And some people cheer that as a great accomplishment because they've removed this disorder from their society. But other people see that as a really dangerous, it is more efficient to do that. But is that what life is all about? Do you think that we could sort of move into something like that, but for more things? Do you see that coming? It's already here, I guess. Is that, what sort of questions of personhood does that call in for the unborn and human potential and stuff like that?
Yeah, great question. Like you said, you mentioned abortion already, and I think that's a big key to all this. Now that abortion's legal, and now that it's becoming mainstream. It's before abortion was seen as, oh man, like we can't go down that road, and now we're already down that road and we're here. That's opened up the gateway to do, as you said, cut off personhood for other people and expand it for the living. So wherever road CRISPR takes us, we really got to keep a check and just consider like who's in control of this technology, because on the one hand, they could, like NPR, be saying, yeah, we're just trying to, modify babies, just trying to give out the best traits and qualities. But at the same time, we also had history teach us, Darwin, Mein Kampf, Hitler, other people, sterilization and the best race, the dominating race, and even Plato, the guardian class, like who's going to be the ultimate class that keeps everybody in line and in check. All these questions come back up as CRISPR keeps expanding, because whoever's in control of the reins of the technology will be in control of the future population, the future.
Yeah. And even if you get to like not deleting people that have genetic disorders, but you get to people that can afford it, maybe select for genes that raise IQ or height or something, then you potentially get this Brave New World scenario where the wealthy and their offspring are more likely to be intelligent and tall, and they just kind of form a genetically distinct ruling class. And that sounds kind of crazy, except for I've read several things just on NPR about how that's kind of already happening, just with the fact that people are very economically segregated. So we're starting to see genetic differences between the different economic classes. And so CRISPR could speed that up, I think. And
You got it.
so at that point, it becomes like, even though making children or potential children smarter might be harmless, there are sort of collective repercussions of that. And is that something that needs to be considered, or is that more like a personal freedom, you can afford it, free market kind of deal?
Absolutely not. You got it. No, that needs to be considered 100%. And like exactly like you were saying, we already have these controlling of economic higher class over the lower class already. If it was up to the free market, we wouldn't have this push for communism, or we wouldn't have this push for a change in the 1% wealth. But just overall, and less on a personal note, every personal action has an implication on the rest of society. New technologies, and especially when those choices are reflected in governing people. Like you said, it's already here. We can point it out in different aspects in life already. We've seen the consequences of it. And today, if you just look hard enough, you can see, that gap, that disparity, inequity is just going to grow. CRISPR grows, I guess, or the advancements off of it.
Yeah. And then I guess to close, any sort of like directional thesis, or like, closing thoughts that you'd really, want me to understand from all your research, or something really interesting that you came across?
Yeah. Okay. Well, something interesting I saw, you said they were growing humans inside of these.
They were talking about in the future, we'd potentially be able to get just like cadavers and just dump people into them.
The Matrix, it sounds like.
Yeah, or like you get a skin suit and you dump people
Okay.
into it.
Interesting. Okay.
I'll find that article, because it's not here, but they were like, yeah, we're growing meat. So we can grow organs, and if we can grow organs, we can potentially just grow humans with a spinal column. That's fun.
Yeah, I saw something. It was called like 2050, and they want to upload the human mind to a computer, so you can just live in a computer for the rest of your life.
Oh, that sounds really fun and not depressing at all.
Not similar or comparable to quarantine at all.
No, not at all.
On a directional note, you already asked me, is it possible to, the courts, the legislator, how do we go about, restricting and getting this right so it doesn't get abused? I think the tools are there. I think there was a legislative push, just like we saw on the ballot this year in California. Do we want to increase funding for stem cell research? Just as easily, a provision could be put on the ballot. Do we want to something about personhood and then criterias or whatnot? It's there. I just don't think we have the people in power considering these things, or the complete opposite. We have the people in power who want to profit off this or benefit and keep that disparity inequitable.
Yeah. So I guess we could potentially see this get integrated into party platforms as time goes on, and that'll be interesting to see who wants what and how sort of the general politics deals with this.
You heard it here first.
I did. I heard it. I'm gonna write. You'll be famous. Well, I think I got all I needed. Been fun, and I guess I'll see you next time we do anything ever.
Sounds like a plan, Sam.